Hi. Welcome y'all into Basketball by Association. My name is Arky, Shea. That is Joel C. Cordes. Joel. Victor Wembanyama looking long and tall. That's how it looks in the preseason. Hard to believe he's very tall, Joel.
And pretty good, I would say, too. Pretty okay.
Listen,
he's all right.
You can't call 30 points good, okay? Against the Miami Heat in the preseason. You can't. I just won't allow it.
It is the Western Conference preview show. We'll have to dig into Wemby and whether 30 points is allowable by Arky, Shea or not. This is
44
episode...
or more. That's the rule.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Make sure to chisel that somewhere in stone. Yeah. So we're going to talk about Wemby. We'll talk about the Spurs. We'll talk about all the Western Conference teams. Make sure to check out the Eastern Conference preview, which we did 244. Which we did last week. You can find that on the YouTube channel. Like, share, subscribe over there if you want the video version. For audio only, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. This is episode 155 of Basketball by Association. And Arky, you don't know how hard I had to work in order to find somebody who ranked 155 in any category for NBA. It's like a number that doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. There are ties, so there was a lot of 154s, 157s. It just doesn't exist up and down. And I was in regular season rankings, playoff rankings, and so I had to settle on something totally obscure and totally bizarre. And you know what? That's fine, because that's what we do here. We're kind of an obscure, bizarre show. So this player is ranked 155th in ABA and NBA playoff scoring. It's so dumb.
Okay.
That's not even the number of points that this person scored. I literally ran out of time and energy for this. A 3-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA. He was on the 05-06 rookie team. He looked like early on he was going to be a Hall of Fame point guard. In fact, there were major debates about whether he or a now legitimate Hall of Fame point guard, which one of them was better. It was a long-standing debate. It was on ESPN all the time. And then as soon as this gentleman changed teams, the debate stopped. And his career went way downhill. Not right away, but over time quickly enough. Want to take a guess?
Not even close to being able to take a guess. I don't even know.
Maybe this will narrow it down. Originally a Utah Jazz man, and then unceremoniously left the Jazz because of some maybe interpersonal issues. And
Karl Malone.
Really good thing. No.
Should have left the Jazz for interpersonal reasons. Actually, this is back in Louisiana Tech, so probably shouldn't have worried about that.
Went to the New Jersey Nets and did 5 seasons there on what should have been a super team. It didn't really work out. Did a little bit in Dallas. Went to Cleveland and was out of the league by age 32. Out of the league by age 32, yet at one point, people thought he was right up there with this other Hall of Fame point guard. This is why it can't be Karl Malone. This other Hall of Fame point guard. The debate went on and on and on, but it got ended, and very unceremoniously so.
I feel like I'm drawing a blank here. Who am I missing?
All right, this is the Darren Williams episode. Darren Williams.
Yeah, I wasn't going to get Darren Williams.
Okay.
I was not going to get Darren Williams.
Remember, this is a 5-time All-Star between Utah and New Jersey, and a guy who legitimately looked like he was on a Hall of Fame trajectory. People were constantly debating on ESPN. Is it Darren Williams? Is it Chris Paul? Is it Darren Williams? Is it Chris Paul? An 11-year career is nothing to shake a stick at. You and I have a lot of respect for that. But to be out of the league by age 32, after having been part of that debate early on, there was a very precipitous decline for Darren Williams.
You know, and I would like to also just say God bless ESPN for forcing 24 hours of discussion down our throats that we always have to have these conversations daily for no real reason. Chris Paul, Darren Williams, it's fine. Just give him a minute. Give him a quick minute.
I will say this about Darren Williams before we go. And I kind of, focused on the negative as part of the clues. Darren Williams at his peak, and even in the first couple of years in New Jersey, nobody, and I mean nobody, not Rajon Rondo, not Jason Kidd, John Stockton, Magic, Steve Nash, nobody threw a better full court bounce pass than I've ever seen than Darren Williams repeatedly in transition. He would one arm whip these bounce passes ahead to the guy on the break, not a lead pass, a looping lead pass like is common. He would whip these bounce passes to people, and I've never seen it replicated by anybody else in the NBA. And it was just, I have a thing for point guards, especially pass first point guards.
Yeah, you do. They're handsome, aren't they?
The setup guys, and Darren Williams, he was superlative in at least that skill, and that's always how I choose to remember him, not the bad breakup in Utah, where he really, I think, took a good thing and set himself up for some difficult karma over the rest of his career.
Well, that's what you grew up with too, right? Which is the pass first point guard. Like that was the priority. The NBA just, not that you don't know this, and that are people who are watching this who are pretty hip to the National Basketball Association of America, are hip to this too. That the league's just changed that position. Just about every position has just evolved so rapidly. It feels like over the last 15, 20 years. It's not that part, but I agree with you, man. I love the pass first guys. That's why I still have that very warm spot in my heart for Rondo. The dude is a system machine. I should say was, like, he's just done and dead with us, but like, that it was kind of what sort of blew him up on the map. When he was, especially like in Boston, he started out these just giant assist numbers. You're like, dude,
creative assists too. Creative assists.
Yes, yeah. So, all right. So this is the Darren Williams episode, and very fitting that we'll be in the Western Conference today to play our good game, our very favorite game that we get to play once a year with two different conferences, which is, are they gooder, worser, or samer? So we'll start with the Western Conference last year, finishing the season number one by 8 full games. 8 full games they were number one. The Phoenix Suns, Joel, a lot of moves for them for this offseason. A lot of smaller moves, right? But just still a lot of movement there for Phoenix. So let me just go ahead and ask you straight up. I'm not.
You're starting with
one.
Phoenix?
Yeah. Why wouldn't we start with Phoenix?
We have to start with Denver. Denver was at the top of the Western Conference. No, they were at the top of the standings. I'm looking right now. 53 wins for the Denver Nuggets, 45 for the Phoenix Suns last year. Are we on the same year?
You're right. I'm inverted. My fault. Okay. Well, let's start with the Nugs, I guess.
Arky, Shea, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. Goodbye, everyone. We're not going to do any of this. Okay, so let's start with the Nugs then. We can talk about them Nuggets. Let me ask you this. For a team that won the World Championship. By the way, have you seen some of the videos from Nikola Jokic since he's been back in the country? One of the questions the reporter asked him was like, so you get out there, and if you during the offseason been able to touch the basketball, play around? He's just like, no, no, and no one's concerned, right? Everyone's concerned if it was like Luka, when he was coming in, it felt like he was a little out of shape. You didn't think he was. You saw more videos of him playing in the offseason this year. But with Nikola, it's just like, I don't know what you want me to do.
Right. And it's unfair because if Harden or Kyrie or somebody else answered that question, that would lead, again, SportsCenter for 3 weeks straight, right?
It wouldn't. And with Jokic, it's just like, So the Nuggets win their sweet conference and world championship last year. So you tell me, Mr. Cordes, gooder, worser, or the samer?
I've got to say worse off. I'm looking at the rest of the Western Conference.
You just called for Denver to miss the playoffs. I cannot believe I just heard that.
Joel Cordes, everybody. We'll see you next week. No. I don't think you can lose a key piece like Bruce Brown and really not replace him. No disrespect to Justin Holiday, but Holiday is a replacement level wing. And yes, we would expect that Christian Brown and Peyton Watson, Zeke Naji, some of the young guys who didn't get a big look last year, Watson coming in, they're going to be better. They're going to progress. But at the same time, The rest of the West was really down last year. We talked about that a lot. That
Yeah.
Denver could win the entire Western Conference with merely 53 wins. And it's no disrespect to them. They had a phenomenal playoff showing. They took care of business. They were the league's best team last year. They deserved it. They had been building to that for a while. Jokic deserved it. The starting five around him really fits. It's savvy. You love Murray and Caldwell Pope in the backcourt. Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon are the exact type of wings you should be flanking Jokic with. I just don't think it's enough. I look at the rest of the Western Conference, and we're going to get to some of these other teams. And Denver, I think, takes that slight step back because Bruce Brown was the glue guy. He was the edgy guy in a lot of cases. He was tough. He was smart. I don't know if they have that. Maybe Christian Brown can fill that role. Maybe Peyton Watson is wise beyond his years. But Reggie Jackson's going to be the lead backup point guard now for them. And I look at that second unit. I don't think it's deep enough. I look at the starting lineup. I go, it's good enough. But if they have a major injury and you upset the apple cart in that second unit where you have to put somebody into the starting lineup, there is not a lot of options coming up after that. And depth does play a big part in the regular season. It does mean something in the playoffs. Denver's just not better. And 53 wins this year in this Western Conference could have you in the 6th seed or even the 7th seed.
I would be surprised if it had them that far down. I don't think the West takes a giant step up like you do for this year. But that's more of a prediction thing coming up. I will agree with you. I mean, I'll keep it brief because you hit on the big one, Bruce. Being gone is a big deal. But it's not a franchise killing deal. It's not one that's going to keep the team from making the playoffs or being competitive throughout the year. As you mentioned last year, it really just was that playoff run, right? There's a lot of questions about Denver because we've had questions about Denver and teams like Utah and stuff when they get to the playoffs. Can they get into the finals and into the conference finals, then to the finals? And then Denver was just dominant. They were just flat out dominant in that postseason run, which makes me, I do worry about losing Bruce, but I do wonder if we start listening to this team going forward, as I listen to my son screaming in the background, if you can hear him.
It's okay. We're a family-oriented show.
We are. Until I start using the F word on him. That's right. I start using the word family on him. I just wonder if this turns into, because we saw them break through the seeding finally, that if we sort of just get to the playoffs like with the Miami Heat mode, they're not going to be worried about winning too many more than 50 games. They get, maybe they get to the guarantee themselves the top 6 seed, 5 seed. I don't think they'll drop that far. I think they'll be a top 4 seed, and then sort of see what the playoffs are going to work for them, because I think they do have now that battle testedness, which is in the fact that they've been able to prove to themselves how good that they've been and how good they can be. So I'm with you, though. I think the West is a lot stronger this year than what it's going to be than what it was last year. But they are definitely we're a little worse off roster wise for them. The 2 seed last year, the Grizzlies of Memphis. Joe, gooder, badder, worser, or samer?
I can't say that they're better, and I have a really hard time saying that they're even the same due to the Ja Morant issues. Because I think
it really so much is just Ja.
And it's not just that he's going to miss the first quarter of the season, essentially. And yeah, you could do a lot worse to get some backups than Marcus Smart and Derrick Rose. Both of those guys are pros. Derek Smart, still a very good defender, maybe not elite, although we'll see now that he's had time to continue rehabbing. They're both tough. They're both smart. They're going to come and do their job. It's a deep team with a lot of great role players, just maybe not a lot of star power. This is going to be a time for Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. to really shine. But I think for the first time with the Memphis Grizzlies, the shine has come off. The luster has come off of the upside where we go, oh, think about what they can be. This is a young group. They're just going to keep getting better. And now you've got some doubt that has crept in. Is Ja Morant really, honestly, going to be the leader off the court that he is on the court for this franchise? Ja Morant is a phenomenal teammate on the court. It's one of the things that my wife first noticed when we saw the Grizzlies a couple years ago, and it stood out to her. She's not a big basketball person, but she watches enough, and she's like, he really does an amazing job of setting the table, encouraging his teammates, being unselfish, but then knowing when to take over. He has not had that same amount of wisdom beyond his years off the court, and that depth sets in, and that is a franchise level of doubt when it is your franchise player, because now all of a sudden he's a bit unreliable. And you start to see, things like in Charlotte with Kai Williams, a first round pick being dismissed, and Miles Bridges getting in trouble again this week in Charlotte. Those off the court issues can sink a franchise when it's a player, much less a starter. When it is your number one guy, Memphis isn't going to go away. They're going to fight. They're going to be a good team. And Ja, very well, maybe this is what sets him straight and he comes back. But we said that last time. We said that before. So how do we know that this time the light bulb goes on? And how do we know that after missing a quarter of the season, the team doesn't just look a little bit off like it did last year when he came back, in time for the playoffs? It's a tough position to be in. So they're worse. I think like Denver, they're probably slightly worse, but this is a really big question mark of a team in the Western Conference.
They are, but I will go ahead and tell you that I'm Pollyanna high on Memphis this year, and I am going to say that they're better this year. Now that is also me looking long term at this. This isn't about the initial 2-3 months of the season that we'll see getting through Christmas and New Year's and Valentine's Day. Not quite Valentine's Day, but once they start to figure out when Ja comes back, what this team will finally look like. I love Marcus Smart coming to this team. I think Marcus Smart is a great Memphis Grizzly pickup. I think he's a total fit for what they do. And so I'm thinking long term with this. By extending Desmond Bane's a big deal for them. I think keeping him a long term and keeping him happy is great for them.
He was taken with the 30th pick in the first round. Isn't that crazy?
That is kind of wild, isn't it? Man, like we always just sort of assume, you got to be a top 5 lottery kind of pick. But then, you see like the Giannis's and the Desmond Bain. You find what turns out to be decent players. It turns out there's more than 7 players in every draft that might be able to play basketball.
By the way, Bain was selected by the Boston Celtics. You don't think they'd love to have him on that team?
Ouch. I think that they would, pay a king's ransom, just like they're paying to everybody else right now to be able to get him onto that roster. So I'm high on Memphis. I think they're going to be better by the time we're talking All-Star break and beyond. And I think this is going to be a formidable team this year. I think they are better. Marcus Smart makes them a huge bit, and they really didn't lose anybody that would make you sort of worry about them. I think it's all Ja. It's all whether or not he comes back, gets his head right, and keeps up with the off the field stuff. But I will say that I haven't seen anything from Ja in the offseason so far, which is good. It's not what we saw last year when he got in trouble once, and you're like, okay, well maybe he gets it. Oh no, he's immediately on the front page again. Awesome. So he's had a much longer stretch of time to sort of think about sort of his consequences that he's going to deal with. So I hope that this is the thing, and I think it will be. I'm on the gooder side for Memphis.
I'll say this about Smart. He brings the defensive intensity and the tough guy mentality that won't back down that Memphis has become known for, that they needed, without the sideshow antics that Dylan Brooks was falling into, right? Dylan Brooks was trying to play the psychological game with everybody, but wound up, I think, playing it with himself as much as anybody else. Yeah. And that type of distraction, especially when you have the off-court stuff with Ja, it was better to make this type of move and get a veteran guy who understands, I think, how to pace himself while playing that mental game. So, yeah, Smart is a great pickup. And their wings, although unheralded name-wise, when you talk about Bain, John Conchar, Luke Kennard, David Roddy, Santi Aldama, Zaire Williams, they got a lot of length, a lot of wingspan, a lot of athleticism, some shooting out of that group. They got a lot to choose from. And then
this is a good team. This is a good deep team. Yeah. You're right. This is a team that is, I think, we talked about them bursting onto the scene a couple of years ago and having to get their heart broken and blah, blah, blah. And I think they've gone through enough adversity. This is a real breakthrough year for them. I think they've got all the pieces to be able to do it.
They get Steven Adams back as well too, so we'll see what happens. Good health needs to occur for Jaren Jackson Jr. for sure, because that's been an issue. But let's go on to number 3 from last year.
Sacramento Kings, wonderful season from them, just spectacularly done. Really broke my heart the way that Golden State Warriors series, excuse me, went, especially the way it went, went. So
The went way.
It went a lot of way. But speaking of ways, this team as a 3 seed last year, could they be better this year? It's going to be tough for them. But are they as a roster gooder, worser, or the samer?
I think for the first time ever, and while you have a child in the background, I have a cat who's trying to make a cameo on this here podcast.
Let him through. Like my wife's arm snuck in, closing the door just a moment ago. I was watching my newborn just until they got back.
He's trying, and I'm gonna have to
bring the kitty. Let's see the kitty. This is the reason people are here. What's the kitty's name?
This is Muchacho.
Muchacho, come on, Muchacho. Show me Muchacho. I'm not moving forward until you show me Muchacho.
We'll see if he walks around this way. He's trying to decide. But
Muchacho, come on, buddy.
In the past, we said Kings are going to king, and that was, of course, a huge insult. Now, of course, if the Kings are going to king, that means can they get back to that 3rd seed? I don't think they are, but I look at this team. Here's Muchacho. There you go.
Muchacho, what's up, partner?
We have a cat sighting.
All right, I think.
Hey, buddy. All right,
Muchacho wants to hang out. Let Muchacho hang out. That's not a pro.
You're
podcast.
the new mascot for the Kings Lion.
Nice job, Muchacho.
All right, it's time for
Thanks
him to
for hanging out. You're welcome anytime on this podcast.
I think the Kings roster wise is the same, and they add Chris Duarte, who I really liked with Indiana, although last year in his sophomore season kind of took a step back. They bring in Sasha Vesnikov over from Europe, who was very successful there. They're going to be banking on Malik Monk to not have been a one-year wonder as a 6th man of the year candidate. You're looking at somebody like Kessler Edwards, who now has to be a rotation level guy, not just somebody they discovered near the end of the season. But you also figure De'Aaron Fox gets better. Davion Mitchell continues to develop. Mm-hmm. Kevin Huerter and Keegan Murray are young enough for sure to keep doing that. Sabonis probably has a little bit more development to do, and especially that chemistry with the rest of his teammates. They bring in Jalen Knoll, who is a very good powerhouse scorer with the Minnesota Timberwolves. They've got depth. Trey Lyles is still there. JaVale McGee comes over. I think it's a really nice deep team, and it's built around a 1-2 punch that really doesn't get better than that in the league. It's just a question, though, of now that they got that first one out of the way, do you build off of that and keep getting better each season like we saw Denver, and it took a little while? Or do you take a massive sophomore slump like we saw with the Atlanta Hawks a few years ago, where they were kind of the darlings? And I think with Mike Brown at the helm, and I think with this group, and Sabonis having been around the block a few times, Huerter was on some good teams in Atlanta, I think they're going to be able to build off of it. But I'm really, and this is going to be a theme, you look at the rest of the Western Conference and a couple of the teams that we're about to get to, and is being the same good enough? Sacramento, I would think, can be a 4 or a 5 seed, maybe even more so than a Memphis or a Denver. That's how high I am on the Kings. But man, is it going to be tough? And they got to advance.
It's going to be it's going to be tough. I do think that I'm with you. I think they're the same for the most part. I do like them. I don't think that they'll do what Atlanta did. Atlanta sort of came on at the end of the year. Right, like they spent the last few months sort of sprinting to the finish line, and then their sophomore year, sort of after they figured that out, was like everyone comes back to earth a little bit, and they just sort of caught lightning in a bottle when they somehow miraculously, and it was a miracle, beat the Knicks in the Garden. It was a miracle that would never happen again, ever happen again.
Trae Young, worker of miracles.
Yes. So ride that until you're into the grave, Trae Young. Okay, the fact that you're quote unquote in New Yorkers' heads. All right. Anyway, so I do think the same. I think it's a nice young group. I think it's a really well-coached group. I think it's a deep group. What I love about this is I don't think the ceiling's anywhere near where they're at right now. I think there's a lot of room for them to be able to grow. So 48 wins and a great bounce back after nearly 2 decades out of the playoffs is a huge step in the right direction. but I think they're also fundamentally built in a good way. Like they finally got a couple of
Yes.
pieces when they traded for Sabonis at the end of a couple of years ago. Like they've turned this team into, first of all, they're an exciting, fun team to watch, and secondly, they're built the right way to sort of be able to sustain and then to make themselves even better. So I think
There are a few. There's just to jump on that real quick before you get to your final point. There are a few starting fives in the NBA that make more sense than the Sacramento Kings, both on paper and in practice. You look at Fox and Herter, Barnes, Murray, and Sabonis, and you go, that fits so perfectly together with that group and what especially Fox and Sabonis bring. Kudos to that front office for finally getting something right and really knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, but you said there's so few of them. It's so hard to be able to make all those moves at the right time to sort of intersect at the right time, and then to get them to come to Sacramento. I mean, that's not the place. Like that's why you have to sort of give up a lot of draft capital, players that you may have, to sort of bring in newer pieces that you think may be able to bring you to the promised land. So I think they're about the same. I think they're probably about a 50-win team this year. I mean, they were 48 last year, so I think we see them probably the 3 seeds, probably their ceiling right now. But like if they finish the year in the top 2, I wouldn't be massively stunned. I'd be a little surprised, but I wouldn't be massively stunned. I think they'll be a tough out in the playoffs too. So.
Man, is it going to be hard next week when we come in for our prediction show, kind of the final preseason show, and we've got to order the Western Conference and pick our. I mean, I'm not looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to great basketball I get to watch all year in the West, but to try to make educated guess predictions, it is going to be tough this year.
Well, like I began this podcast, next is the Phoenix Suns, who were 8 games out of first place, a full 8 games out of first place last year. Made a ton of offseason moves, minor moves for the most part.
Boy,
Some
did
moves
they
at
ever.
the end of last year, but there was just a lot of movement, a lot of roster reconfiguration and adjustment for a team that we thought going into the postseason had a shot to be able to go all the way. They did not quite melt that way, and they ran into the buzzsaw that was the Denver Nuggets to start everything off. So, talk to me, gooder, worser, betterer, the Phoenix Suns.
Absolutely better, and has to be penciled in as one of the top 2 teams in the Western Conference this year. Yes, they're not going to trot out a traditional point guard. No, that doesn't matter because Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and even Josh Okogie have all spent time playing point guard at the NBA level. Grayson Allen has handled the ball a little bit. Will they probably find a conventional backup by the time they get to the playoffs? Yes, you would think around the deadline they're going to add one more body there. But it's the beauty when you have such top-line talent like Beal, Booker, and Durant that suddenly the rest of the pieces look better. Yusuf Nurkic is a guy who Portland tried to make the third wheel, maybe a little bit overcast in that regard. Now all of a sudden as your fourth wheel, maybe even your fifth, depending on how you look at Grayson Allen coming off the bench or somebody like Eric Gordon, who used to be a 6 Man of the Year candidate, Nurkic fits perfectly. Josh Okogie, Grayson Allen, Drew Eubanks, Eric Gordon, Keita Bates-Diop, Chimezie Metu, these are all guys, even Nasir Little, are all guys who have proven themselves previously to be rotation caliber players. Where they fit in the rotation, that's always been up for debate. And 2 other youngsters that I want to call out who are going to play some major minutes this year, Yuta Watanabe at the forward spot and Saban Lee at one of the guard spots. It's still up in the air whether those are rotation level guys. Is Bol Bol an NBA rotation level player? We don't know yet. But on a team with that much firepower in the top line, and now you're asking that whole list of supporting characters, many of whom can stretch the floor at an above average rate, or in the case of Eric Gordon and Grayson Allen on certain nights, a elite rate. This team is loaded with shooters. It's loaded with length. It's loaded with interchangeable parts. The one question that I have with this team, and it's not at the traditional point guard spot, even though that's where people have honed in on. Do they have the toughness and the athleticism that they need up front outside of Nurkic, who's going to give you toughness, but maybe not so much of the athleticism? They really don't have a forward who's going to play above the rim a whole bunch. Drew Eubanks is going to muscle people around inside. Keita Bates-Diop can run the floor, but again, not really a finisher. Maybe it's Nasir Little. Maybe it's Chimezie Metu. We've seen flashes of those guys in in Portland and in Sacramento, respectively. But it feels like they're missing that edgy, tough, shot blocking, power forward / center type of guy who's really going to mix it up inside, be better than his 5 or 6 fouls, and finish plays above the rim. That I don't want to call them soft, but they are a very, very shooting heavy team with a couple of really decent defenders. And is that enough? I don't know.
I'll tell you this. There's a reason this team is the favorite to win the West. Right now, they are absolutely loaded. There is no doubt about it. They should be the number one contender coming out of the West going into the season. In fact, they are number 2 as far as overall to win the championship. Do you know who's got the odds-on favorite to win the championship right now?
It's got to be Milwaukee, right? The hype after the Lillard trade.
It's Boston and Milwaukee.
Man,
They're both
don't
plus
agree
380.
with that. We talked about Boston last week, and I called them potentially soft, and I stick by that.
Yeah. Well, Denver and Phoenix are both plus 550 to win the title. So those are your next 2. But going back to this team, I think I'm going to trust you a little bit more on some of these guys like Watanabe and stuff because I haven't watched a lot of, Portland bad basketball in my life.
Watanabe was he did with the Raptors. He's been on the Nets. He's bounced around a little bit.
I just feel like
yeah.
I'm sorry, my bad. I haven't watched a lot
of
of
Nasir Little absolutely was on Portland. Yeah,
watched a lot of Raptors basketball either. I know more about Nasir Little. I know him from his college days too. I think he's a good player. I think this team is set up pretty solid. To more than solid. They're really really good. They're not going to be the 4 seed going into the Western playoffs this year. It's a no doubt about it. And I think it's really you hit on a couple of them, but I think the biggest one's Grayson Allen. I mean, to be able to get a guy who may play 8 to 9 minutes a game is huge. It's probably the biggest piece you could possibly get for this team. Plus, if he can come back to slapping the floor like he used to do in college, that's what I want. I also want a guy that's willing to just trip people and kick them in the nuts every now and then. That's
plus
what I
need.
On
the nights that he gets himself ejected or just isn't hitting, you bring in Eric Gordon, who gives you the shooting without some of the extracurriculars that Arky loves so much.
Let me talk to you. First of all, don't act like you don't love it too. Come on, nut punches are the best. Draymond Green, that was why it was so awesome to get kicked out of the finals for being able to kick a fella in the nuts. Okay, so I want to talk to you now about the Los Angeles Clippers, the team that I can never quite get a full grasp on in my life. I can never, and granted, some of it's been injuries, some of it's just been underperformance. It's hard to sort of figure out what the Clippers will be. They were a 5 seed last year, 9 games out of first place a season ago. So tell me what you think of the Clippers. Are they gooder or not?
I'm going to say slightly better because as of right now, cross your fingers,
Mason
knock
Plum
on
is
wood,
coming back, right?
Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are supposed to be healthy and hopefully can play a full season. It's been a while since we've been able to say that even at the start of the year.
I feel like I've had both of these kids since they've been healthy and together, and one's 3, correct? Like it just like it feels like forever ago that Kawhi Leonard was dominating the NBA in Toronto for his 1-year run for the championship. Like it feels so long ago.
This team is veteran. They're purposely veteran. I got to look at the average age per roster, but the Clippers have to be at the top or at least top 3. And that's despite having Terrence Mann, Bones Highlander, both younger guys. Kenyon Martin Jr. comes over this year, gives them an athletic wing who can finish above the rim. They kind of needed that. It's not like Norman Powell is old. Zubats isn't all that old either. But, George and Kawhi Leonard in their prime. Westbrook near the tail end of his career. Batum, Marcus Morris Sr., Mason Plumlee near the end of their career. Robert Covington near the end of his career. So they're veteran. They know how to play. Kudos to them for continuing to stay in the mix, despite the fact that their top 2 guys have just been absolutely unreliable when it comes to being healthy, especially Kawhi Leonard. Paul George, I think, has given them a yeoman's effort to be available. But we've seen from Paul George, you don't want him cast as your lead guy. If he's 1B to a 1A, that's one thing. But ideally, he's your second wheel. And this all does hinge on Kawhi Leonard's health and for Paul George to be available when Kawhi Leonard is. If that happens, this again remains a team that can challenge for a top 4 spot in the West. I think where they finished last year at 5th probably feels realistic for them if everybody's healthy. And if not, then this is probably a year that they begin to slide. But again, Ty Lue has kept these guys locked in. They've shuttled in a couple of different veteran point guards. Russell Westbrook made sense. He did the right things. He said the right things. And the team really rallied around him. I think he was a plus all the way. And on the nights that he wasn't maybe having a great game, Bones Highland, now with a full year under his belt with this roster, I think has a lot of upside. Terrence Mann has a little bit. I like the roster. I like the group. But like you said, we've been saying this for 3 years. We have. There's nothing more I can other than to say Kawhi Leonard is available. Therefore, they are better than last year.
I'm gonna say the same until I sort of see them play for more than 10 games or something in a row. That I'm just gonna be it's same, and that's I don't think they're a great team. Even if they're healthy, right? I think this West is just going to be so deep this year. It's going to be hard for that roster to be able to come out. By the way, I found what it looks like to be the ages of the NBA rosters as constructed right now. They are not the oldest roster. They are the second oldest roster. Would you like to take a guess at who the oldest roster is?
It's not the Lakers anymore, because it very much used to be them. Let me look through here.
Is
it back to being the Golden State Warriors?
It's the team we're talking about next, the Golden State Warriors, the average oldest roster right now at 28, nearly 29 years old across the board. So talk to me, Golden State Warriors. They're your 6th seed. They come in. Let me just can I just start this one? I'm going to go ahead and say that I think they're worse. I don't think that this. I think the run's over for Golden State. I think last year was such a difficult slog for them to be able to get back into where they were a sort of guarantee spot. And yet they can put on magnificent performances, and they still have players that you want to be able to be attached to, legendary players, just a phenomenal run. But I think last year was part of it, the year before even so, but last year, I said it last year, I thought that their run was basically done. I thought they were just going to be an old team and the miles were going to show up on them. Now they did get past they were wily veterans getting past a team like Sacramento, because Sacramento got a little over their skis, got a little too excited, thought that they were going to be able to blow out Golden State, and Golden State, being the veterans that they are, sort of were able to sort of maintain focus. I think this is still a playoff team. I think this is a team that still might be able to get to the semifinals, but they're not better than a semifinals team. I don't see anything they did in the offseason here that means a hill of beans, really, to me. That's right, an entire hill of beans. Draymond Green get that 4-year deal to be able to come back. He's 400 years old, right? Like I don't like he's 400 years old and he doesn't score, but he's never been a scorer. But he's a defense energy type guy, and he got big money there. Golden State paying $2 billion to for their roster, basically. I think this is just it. I think with all the wins and the playoff runs that they can get, they can just soak it up. They had a great run. Now they're just a pretty solid team. They're a good team that might be able to make the semis.
Crazy thing about Draymond is he's 33 years old. So, but the decline, we're seeing it. We are seeing it. Cognitively, he still is one of the smartest players in the league, does a lot of great things. But
his brain don't run laps, buddy.
Right. Athletically, it's starting to show. And this is a guy who was already not the greatest athlete, out there. Is he a plus player? Yes. For the money they paid? No. But you understand doubling down and keeping the band together. They earned it. It's surprising that you would say not worth a hill of beans to bring in a Hall of Famer like Chris Paul, but I also get it because it's such a weird fit. It's such a weird fit.
Chris Paul doesn't fit there. Chris Paul's also high price. I guess won't be that high price this year. And old. Like you're not
right. 38 in his case, legitimately NBA old.
Yeah. Like, listen, I'm not saying that he's not a good person or has been good throughout his career, but he's not been a guy that gets you over the hump to win that championship. Like, he's been chasing that his entire career, and he's been either getting hurt in some of the playoff appearances, or he's missing playoff time, or the team's not been good enough overall. Like, he's just, I get that he's at the point of his career where he's chasing. If he could find a spot to land where he thinks he might be able to grab on a championship or just to keep playing, great. But Chris Paul's not great right now for this team, especially for this team especially, it just it doesn't. It was a weird move. It was a weird move and a weird sign, and I did not understand it. I don't understand it now.
I think it's a great move for their second unit, and that Jordan Poole was going to be a scorer, and you didn't necessarily need more of that. And now for Chris Paul, primarily, I would think to quarterback the second unit and set the table for guys like Moses Moody, Gary Payton II, and especially Jonathan Kuminga. And then you can bring a guy in like Dario Saric, who really has struggled with injuries over his career, but is going to step in and play the Nemanja Bjelica role of a big who can pass and who can shoot a little bit. And that was one of the secret sauces to their bench 2 years ago when they did win the championship. I like that, and especially for a team that looked overmatched in their second unit last year, especially when they were on the road. They were a terrible team on the road. But in the starting lineup and in crunch time is where I just don't understand how Chris Paul fits with this group. Let's keep in mind that Andrew Wiggins missed a ton of time down the stretch for them last year because of personal reasons. Hopefully that's all taken care of and he can log a full season. He was absolutely the catalyst for that team defensively during their championship run, but also kind of Johnny on the spot for them offensively, a guy who could get you a turnaround jumper, a post up, a big slam to be above, play above the rim. And they're going to have that back. So I look at them as about the same, which is where you were too. And to me, that is a team that's going to hang around the top 6. They're going to win some games, but because the West is better, they're also going to lose some games, hopefully not as many where they shoot themselves in the foot like last year. I think that'll be greatly reduced. And come playoff time, they are going to be that proverbial team that you just don't want to see in the first round, and you probably don't want to see in the semifinals. But yeah, all bets are off at this point about this being a championship contender. I agree that the window is probably closed, but in the words of Rudy T, never underestimate the heart of a champion. Like, they're still kicking. They're not in the ground yet.
The Lakers are your 7th seed. The Lakers and Warriors just met for a big-time preseason matchup. Means most of what I can trust out of that game is that the Warriors came back and won. So if that tells you anything, Joel, Warriors in 6, baby. So we've talked about the Lakers a lot on this podcast about how they have sort of made this team into miraculously a much better team than what anyone could ever rightfully expect for the Lakers. And they're actually pretty good now that you think about it. Now, a lot of it hinges on one man, Anthony Davis, who was hitting threes last night in that game. So his health, how it goes. But talk to me what your feelings are. The Los Angeles Lakers, are they a better team than what they were last season?
It pains me to say this because this is very off-brand for Joel C. Cordes. I am not a big market guy, and I already had to tell people that the New York Knicks were among the top 2 to 3 teams in the East.
Here we go.
I think not only are the Los Angeles Lakers better, but spoiler alert for next week, I think this is the West's best team, even better than the Phoenix Suns or the defending champs or the Golden State Warriors. This is the best roster that has ever been assembled around LeBron James.
Wow. I'm gonna stop talking and let that sink in. I'm gonna let you say it one more time and let it sink in for like 3 Mississippi.
This and I told this to somebody the other day and they said, really? Even the Heatles? And my response was, look, it's hard to argue against the top line talent on the Heatles. That was 3 super duper stars all in their prime. The Lakers have 2 that are exiting their prime. But when you talk about overall the supporting cast, the cohesiveness, the fit, the number of young guys who are just old enough to be able to play in big situations and understand what's going on, they're smart, but they're athletic, they fill their role, and you have veterans. You have some wily veterans in there too. This team has everything. They have a response for everything except for a season-ending injury to Anthony Davis. And even if that were to happen, to be able to choose from Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura, Christian Wood, Jackson Hayes, Taurean Prince, and LeBron all on your front line, there are worse contingency plans than that. Even if LeBron goes down, There are worse contingency plans than Taurean Prince and Cam Reddish, D'Angelo Russell, Gabe Vincent, Austin Reeves, especially at your wing spots. No, they're probably not a championship team if LeBron or Anthony Davis goes down. That much remains true. But if those two are able to conserve their energy, maybe monitor the mileage a little bit, and this roster provides the ability to do that. You've got your irrational confidence guy in D'Angelo Russell. You've got your do-it-all high motor guy in Jared Vanderbilt and Jackson Hayes, who does all those things just maybe a little less smartly than Jared Vanderbilt does, but Hayes has got the athleticism and the wingspan. You've got a high flyer in Cam Reddish. You've got Rui Hachimura who can score. Gabe Vincent is the second coming of Derek Fisher. He is a point guard who just makes the right play and the big play at the right time. He was an enormous loss for the Miami Heat. And the fact that he may or may not start on this Lakers team is criminal to the rest of the league. This is a loaded roster, and it has the best player of all time or second best player of all time, depending on how you slice that. And you have Anthony Davis, a Hall of Famer. They're better. And the fact that like last year they made that run on half a season because they had revamped that entire roster at the trade deadline. And as good as they looked on that powerful run to get to the 6th seed or the 7th seed, whatever it was, and get into the playoffs, now you've got a full training camp and you added more reinforcements in Reddish and Vincent and Taurean Prince. And let's just let it sink in that the Lakers went out and got like 4 or 5 of the Timberwolves' old reserves and a couple of their starters, and said, "Oh, that group worked well together. Come on over to our team with this top line talent." This is a scary, scary roster in the West.
Yeah, I can't add a lot to that. Listen, this team, I still can't fathom how this team is in a roster spot that it's in today versus what it was 1 year ago today when we were talking. Like, it's just there has to be some collusion somewhere. Like, it cannot just be wonderful deal making. Like, it can't be. Now, when people talk about building around your best players and building about LeBron, this is what they're talking about. This is exactly what they're talking about. And maybe this is not the best roster for LeBron 8 years ago around him, but right now, and with Anthony Davis, this is perfect. This is just about as good as you're going to be able to do. And you're right. Everything just hinges upon the health of Anthony Davis as far as being able to fall in love with them being able to win the championship, the idea of them being able to do it.
Remember how I said Sacramento was like the best starting five or one of the top starting fives and how difficult it was? It pains me to say this, but the Lakers roster, I think, top to bottom through their first like 12 guys, is the roster that makes the most sense out of anybody in the league this year. And it may not even be close. I hate to say that about the Lakers. I really, really do. But I'm going to watch a lot of their games this year just because I love what Rob Pelinka put together. It is such a good group.
Rob Pelinka either is one of the best GMs ever, or at least had one of the best runs ever, or has sold his soul to the devil. It's
right.
One of the two.
It has some major dirt, some major photographs that nobody is supposed to see on the rest of the league.
There is something. It's one of the two. It's definitely not somewhere in the middle. It's not him just sort of doing like his Danny Ainge work, where we just make shrewd deals here and there. And next thing you know, 2 years later, the Celtics have a great roster. You know, it's wild. But yeah, like they're one of the two favorites in the West and in one of the top 4 in the NBA for good reason to win the championship. They are just they're loaded. They're loaded for what they want to be able to do and can be able to do. And it's I feel like someone sold their soul. Like, it's got to be that. I felt it last year at the trade deadline when Rob Pelinka just pulled out the massive coup.
flipped Westbrook and got 3 to 4 rotation level guys, including a starter out of it. Give me a break. 2 starters out of it, and Vanderbilt and Russell.
And what you did is you also made yourself an attractive place in the offseason to sort of sign a 1 or 2 year deal. Sort of find yourself like this.
Torian Prince, baby, and Gabe Vincent. That's how they got him.
That you made yourself, this isn't the we have to hold teams to 94 points to win team of a couple of years ago. This is the, we're going to be able to go play kind of team.
And how good has Austin Reeves looked during FIBA? Obviously, during the run last year, diamond in the rough player who came off their G League team and now looks like the perfect complementary piece to LeBron and Anthony Davis. The dude can play, and he can shoot from outside. He can get to the cup. He's a perfect, again, gap filler for a team that's got a lot of them suddenly.
All right. With the team that's got almost as good of a roster, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are up next on your list, it is inarguable to me that you got one of the top guys as far as just skills as well as supreme watchability on your roster in Anthony Edwards. But you tell me, this roster better suited to make a run this year? Worse suited?
Slightly better in that you have more time for Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert to work together. I still think Cat is the weak link on this team. I wish they would have moved him during the offseason. I don't know why he continues to get chances, but I understand they paid a king's ransom to get Gobert and to try this experiment, to judge it after 20-some games of Towns and Gobert actually getting to play together last year because of Towns' injury. I understand why you would try to run it back, but they better have some people on speed dial by the trade deadline if this falters again. Because if it doesn't work this year, it's not going to work. And we saw that with Domantas Sabonis and Miles Turner in Indiana. If it's not going to work, it's not going to work. This team, I say, is slightly better because Anthony Edwards continues to progress. He is on track to be a super duper star. Jaden McDaniels is an all NBA defender and should this year get that nod. He was robbed last year of it. Naz Reid returns. Kyle Anderson is great for them. But Shake Milton, I thought, was a steal for them to get him from Philadelphia. He's a guy who is going to be able to put up Jalen Noel type of numbers, but actually be able to run the offense as well. But I can't say that they're much better because Mike Conley is a year older. Gobert did not look like a defensive player of the year candidate last year and wasn't even in the conversation. He looked like a solid starting center. That was it. That's not what you paid for. The bench is a little bit scary. Naz Reid, great. I love Jordan McLaughlin. He's a nice table setter. Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Troy Brown got to prove that they can be a rotation caliber players an entire season, not just for flashes. They lost Torian Prince, who is kind of the ultimate glue guy and the level-headed veteran on that team. So this team will go as far as Anthony Edwards can carry them and as far as Karl Anthony Towns stays out of his own way and everybody else's way. They can be a good team. They're not a great team. Obviously, it's the Wolves. I could talk a lot more about them, but I'll say slightly, modestly better. And is that good enough in a West that's so good? I don't know.
I will say this. I do like Shake Milton as a pickup. I think that was a nice grab by you guys. I don't know, again, like how far that's going to be able to take you up into an improved West, but I do think that does add to the roster. And I do have a little concern with Mike Conley getting a year older, but like that, to say the same thing with just about everybody. Like it's sort of getting to that age, right? When we're talking about how many are on the Warriors that are getting up to that age, so on and so forth. The only person I don't worry about is LeBron getting old because LeBron will never age. That's what I could figure out. Next team on the list, I don't know what to do with this team. The New Orleans Pelicans. Herb Jones, you get him on a nice contract and keep him there. I love Herb Jones. Love Herb Jones.
I don't think there's anybody out there, at least I haven't heard them, who's like, Herb Jones is trash. I hate that guy. I think everybody is universally a Herb Jones fan.
Okay, well, you took away my hot take, I guess. I would propose to Herb Jones. How's that? I loved him at Alabama. He is a tenacious defender. He is spectacular. Love that guy. I do wish I could get more than 25 games out of Zion ever again, or 30 games out of Zion ever again.
Whatever do you mean?
Well, he He missed all of 21-22, 22-23. He was done like right after the new year. I don't know. This was a team last year we thought going into the year this was going to be a watchable team. And for the beginning of the year, they were a very watchable team. They're a team to sort of be able to pay attention to. But man, I can't say that they're better. And I don't want to say that they're worse. I want this team to be as interesting as it can be. I don't know that they are. Like, I think they got a couple of really stud players. One of them, I just don't know if we'll ever see them on the court for long stretches anymore.
New Orleans has a nice starting five. It's an unconventional one, but CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, Jonas Valanciunas. It's talented. It can do a lot of different things. The issue is not only has Zion missed a bunch of time, but Brandon Ingram has typically missed about 25 games. Now you look at that second unit, Trey Murphy is out indefinitely. Jose Alvarado had a pretty big injury last year. The second unit is kind of scary bad, almost Charlotte Hornets bad. And especially when you have some top line guys, Valanciunas has missed, big portions of seasons in the past. McCollum has had some injury issues in the past. When you have one of those guys go out and you are replacing with not only a far below replacement level, but then the bench has nothing to replace the guy who just jumped up into the starting lineup. That's where I think they really get into some trouble. And yep, everybody loves Willie Green as a coach. I think maybe they're the same because Zion conceivably plays more games than he did last year. But this easily could be a team that falls out of the playoff picture and is way too talented to do that. But there's just too many other good teams, including a handful of ones that we haven't even talked about yet, who are chomping at the bit to climb the standings. And New Orleans just feels like they stood pat on a team that hasn't accomplished anything yet.
Yeah. It's literally holding on to what this roster could be if Zion's healthy. I mean, that's it. Obviously, locking up Herb was a big deal. I think they still think they could be pretty decent if everyone's healthy and playing the way they think. But you're right. There's no depth on this roster. It's rough for them. And they're playing team right now. At best, right now, I think they're playing team health determinant based on what they can be. Let's talk about one of these teams that is chomping at the bit. Oklahoma City, where the wind comes whipping down the court. Look at this roster, buddy. Hello, sweet Shamu. That's right. We're talking Wales here. Victor Oladipo's now a member of this here basketball broadcasting team. Well, not broadcasting. You got, of course, the dude who was trying to score 50 a game with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, but on a team that was pert near 500. Josh Giddey played super great. Jalen Williams. How about, can I interest you in a Chet Holmgren maybe being a signing at some point? This, I think, is when we start talking about teams chomping at the bit. This is one of those teams, I think, chomping at the bit to be able to show up into the playoffs beyond just the one seed opportunity.
Their bench is very much a work in progress. It's a bunch of young guys who are still, being figured out about whether they are rotation caliber guys in the NBA. They're so young that you just don't know yet. But that starting lineup, you've got a bona fide all-star in Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. You've got a guy who is an all-NBA defensive, type of player in Lou Dort. Josh Giddey is a fringe all-star player in the making. Chet Holmgren is a guy who I think probably makes a couple of all-stars in his career as well.
He's tall, though. He's tall.
Jalen Williams was a Rookie of the Year candidate last year. They are stacked with athleticism, but also a lot of smarts in that starting lineup. They're scary. And the fact that they are so young and there's so much, if all of a sudden this bench does figure itself out, and you have a couple of guys who are able to step up and be reliable players every single night, Oklahoma City is a threat. They are a play-in lock and a threat to steal some games from the big boys. We all know that Oklahoma City itself is a really tough place to play. They've gotten behind this team because it's taken its lumps over the last couple of years. Last year, they made the concerted effort not to jigger their starting lineup so often to purposely lose games. Instead, they went for it. They got those guys some experience. I'm all in on Oklahoma City's trajectory over the next couple of years, and it starts now. This is the first step where we're going to go, oh, not only are they finally competent where they're not a bottom feeder, but this team is a threat. They're a threat. They could be a much bigger one depending on how that bench goes.
Well, so what it turns out is that when you hoard 17,000 draft picks,
yes,
that you're able to actually use them where there's drafting players. You can afford to miss on guys a lot more than you can if you don't have 17,000 draft picks. And you can sort of move some of those pieces away. And it's partly why you're able to have like a Victor Oladipo now on your roster. This is a sneaky fun team to watch. I don't think I'm going to grab a ton of OKC basketball early in the year. Actually, I may just in case Chet Holmgren gets hurt like immediately. But I very much think this team is top end of the play-in capable for this year, and it's going to be a boy to see that atmosphere rocking playoff basketball. That's the Lord's work. That's what we want the Lord doing this year. If you're listening, Jesus, this is what we want this year. We want Oklahoma City hosting basketball playoff games. That's what we want. Okay, coming up next is the Dallas Mavericks. Well, Davis Bertrands is gone. How about that? What else you got?
All right, I'll talk about the things that I like. Grant Williams coming over. That was a nice pickup for Dallas. They needed a guy like that. He's tough. He does a lot of different things. Is he going to be overexposed in the starting lineup? That's a major question mark. Moving Maxi Kleber and Dwight Powell to the bench, which is probably what's going to happen. Adding Rashawn Holmes into that front line, Derrick Jones Jr. Those are all usable pieces that have either been around Luka Doncic or fit with them. They bring back Seth Curry, a guy who's played with Luka before. Not a needle mover, but the type of shooter like Tim Hardaway Jr. that makes sense next to Luka. But I think this team is worse. You're going to start two rookies, presumably up front. You added some okay pieces to the team, but in bringing back Kyrie, who they rolled too big of a dice on to try to get, he's a distraction. We don't understand how he and Luka fits. Yes, they're going to have a chance to figure that out this year. Yes, it was an unfair it's unfair to completely judge what we saw because they hardly played together. Trade deadline pieces or deals of major pieces like that typically take a while to coalesce. So we'll give them a fair shake this year, but there is a strong possibility with how good the rest of the West is that no matter how good Luka is, this team winds up out of the play-in picture. Not because they do a weird thing where they sit and lose a couple of games seemingly on purpose like they did last year, but because they just aren't good enough. And that's going to take some of the shine off Luka, and it's definitely going to take shine off of Kyrie in this pairing, and it's going to start the whispers about is Luka's long-term future with the Dallas Mavericks. And that feels premature, but I do not foresee a strong season from this team because there's too much good at the top in the West, and there are a couple of teams underneath Dallas who I think can flat out be better than them.
Yeah, this is okay. So there's not a ton to talk about with that roster as far as changes are concerned. I'm a little lower on you than on Grant Williams and what he might be able to be for Dallas, especially since you talked about him possibly being overexposed. I think that's a yes. I don't think I need to see much of it this year to know that. But again, I'm basing it completely on what I've seen of him in college and what I thought projected out to Boston, which was better than I was expecting, but still not what I think is going to be good for Dallas long term. He who shall not be named. I was surprised that he was able to come back and that Dallas would want to give him a 3-year deal to sort of be able to come back. But I think this narrative that's out there of Kyrie going to teams and immediately trying to off their superstars, I don't think it's unfair. Okay.
Yeah.
And yes, it is a little unfair and premature to call it a dead duck based on the little time they had together based on health and when the trade actually happened. But I don't have a lot of hopes for it. Whatever will happen will be a pleasant surprise, but I don't think I'm going to be expecting a lot from it. So I do think that they're worse, and a lot of that is basically because the West is going to have some huge pumpers and shakers. Maybe not this next one, the Utah Jazz, who did get John Collins. About it.
Omer, your 7 comes in over from the Miami Heat, who apparently has chopped liver to Arky Shea, but no, I understand.
Okay. I'll go first. I don't think they're better. I think they're worse. But I don't think they were trying to get better, like a lot better, marketably better, right? And I think they're sort of they're in a rebuilding spot for them to try to be able to get back up and to be where they were for so long. They just never could break through the ceiling. So I think they're rebuilding for the next couple of years. I would not be surprised to see if they were at the bottom of the
really
West this year.
Okay.
I do think there's a chance that could just sort of fall out from them. But I mean, if you just take a look at who's below them, I mean, there's maybe outside of Portland, like there's a couple of teams that are now at the phases of their rebuild where we're expecting a lot more competitiveness out of them. Talking about San Antonio, talking about Houston, those teams I think are going to be better, and I think as a result, one of those teams is going to fall is Utah.
Utah has a big experiment this year with that starting lineup. Is Colin Sexton a starter, or is he a 6-man type of guy? And they already have Jordan Clarkson to do that. If Colin Sexton cannot be a full-time starter, you have a redundancy. And as much as this team loves Jordan Clarkson, I think he's the type of piece that they move on from because he's a veteran. He can fetch a higher price in return for a team, a playoff caliber team than Sexton would. And Sexton is a guy they're going to continue to develop, maybe in that 6-man role. Is Talon Horton Tucker a guy who has shown that he can be a rotation level guy? Is he a starter? Is Lauri Markkanen really a multi-time all-star, or was last year just kind of one of those fantastic moments that's a blip in a career? John Collins, starting caliber power forward? Yes, there's no question about that. Can he be anything more than that? We never really saw that in Atlanta, but he's getting paid as if he's your top guy or your second best player. Walker Kessler, I think this is the X factor for them. He had a fantastic rookie season. He was not in over his head. He was aggressive as a shot blocker, fantastic as a roll man, reminds me of a rich man Steven Adams, for all of the really great things that Adams does. But Adams is not an all-star. Kessler may be a guy who sniffs around all defensive team a couple of times in his career, and that would be fantastic, especially considering that they bring him over for a guy in Rudy Gobert that they wanted to get rid of. But this is a team where the bench isn't good enough. The bench was a question mark last year, especially after they started to cut bait on some of their veterans. You're right. I don't think they want to win necessarily, but I also don't think they're going to pull the plug prematurely like they did last year, where they started to win games and they were in the mix until the trade deadline. And then Danny Ainge said, nope, sorry, Will Hardy and company. We're just not going to do this. Hardy is a fantastic coach, and he's going to get a lot out of these guys. It's the reason why I believe in a Utah Jazz team even more than a Dallas Mavericks team, because Hardy's just a better coach than a Jason Kidd. There's no question about it. Is that going to be enough? We've talked about the West being so good and some of these teams underneath. I hear what you're saying about this team probably being on the outside looking in, and maybe that's by design. But again, Utah's a tough place to play. This is a team that will steal games. They should be watchable, except when the second unit gets in. Then you may want to click away and find somebody else during that portion.
All right, let's get off of some trash, get on to some treasures. The Trailblazers. Speaking of teams that aren't doing much winning right now, I've got here's clearly the answer, right, Joel? We didn't really talk about it. They're worse. They're clearly they're worse, but they're selling out. They're completely selling out. They're just trying to get as much bang for their buck as they possibly could, and they got a lot of pieces. They're probably better longer term as they start to rebuild and start to build toward getting back that, but it's not this year. It's clearly not this year.
No, and at the trade deadline, Malcolm Brogdon will no longer be a Portland Trailblazer, and Matisse Thybulle probably won't be a Portland Trailblazer either. Jeremy Grant likely will not. So those are guys who have been in the league for a little bit now, have established themselves. They're going to be there on this team to try to help young guys like Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, and yes, even DeAndre Ayton, Shea Sharp, to see the league, to play the right way. There's got to be
exciting. Shading Sharp is a fun player to watch.
Yeah, they've got to have
there to get people out to the ballpark every night.
Oh, for sure, and they've got some adults in the room, which is what every team needs. Get them off to the right start, and then get something back for those veterans as they go to playoff caliber teams. That's exactly how rebuilding is supposed to be done. It is an exciting group. We're going to get to see if DeAndre Ayton can go back to being maybe your first or second option on a team. Robert Williams III, I don't like the fact that they have both of those guys on this roster because I don't think either one can really play power forward. But Portland's rolling the dice that one of these guys is a long-term keeper. And I think because both of them have had some character questions in their past, this is a good litmus test to go, which one of these guys is going to get out of his head and not take it as a slight that he might be coming off the bench or in a timeshare and just come out and play and win the job. Because the guy who does that is the one you want long-term, and the one who sulks about it or has veiled disgruntledness in the media, that's the guy that you're going to move while he still has some upside and some other team wants him. So it's a dice roll, but it's a calculated one. The backcourt, I don't know how Scoot Henderson and Anthony Simons and Shea Sharp all fit together. I don't think they do. I think you keep two, maybe even one out of those three guys, but now is the time to find out. And this is what you do with a young team. The bench is, outside of Brogdon, Thibault, and Robert Williams, it's probably trash garbage this year, and that's by design, again, where you're just going to get some guys in, see if they're a keeper, see if they're a rotation level guy, and you can find a diamond in the rough. But Portland is not designed to win games.
Next up, tell me I'm wrong when I think the Houston Rockets are ready to start their competition mode.
Yes,
I think they're
right.
22-win team last year. I think they made some significant moves in the offseason to sort of get them, I guess, not only sort of age-wise, a little bit older and more experienced, but also locker room-wise, where you start feeling like there's some leaders to start building up this young talent that they've been acquiring. And now I think they're ready. I don't know if they are playing good at this point. They may be just off of that, but I definitely think they're better than 22 wins. And I definitely think they're ready to start their uptick.
Fred VanVleet, an enormous pickup for them because he's a leader. He's established himself in the league. He's an overachiever, a hard worker. He is going to be the type of role model that you want next to somebody like Jalen Green, rather than Kevin Porter Jr., who probably will never play in the NBA again after the domestic violence charges against him this offseason. And it's too bad to see a young man scuttle his career like that. Amen Thompson, I am not sure what he's going to be as an NBA pro, but I think this is a perfect opportunity with Houston to be able to bring him off the bench and find out naturally instead of kind of thrusting him into the starting lineup and going, hey, you're in the deep end of the pool. Hope you do okay, because that's what the Rockets have been doing the last couple of years with their young guys. Dillon Brooks is a savvy signing. He brings drama. He brings a sideshow. We already talked about how he wasn't a great fit in Memphis, but Dillon Brooks is going to stand up for his teammates. He's not going to let them get punked on. He is going to take the heat from the opposing team's best players. He's going to be the guy that the crowd hates and that they hone in on, and you need that. A young team needs that. Dillon Brooks is going to play the Charles Oakley role for this young Houston Rockets team, and that's what he's built for. It was fine as a signing. They bring in Reggie Bullock and Jacques Landale, two rotation-level guys who are also veterans. Aaron Holiday at this point is a veteran. So you've got, for Jabari Smith Jr., Alperen Sengun, and Jalen Green, but also younger guys like Jayshawn Tate and Amen Thompson. You, Atari Easton, too. You have insulation around them where they can grow, they can develop, but they don't have to do it all. And that's kind of what Houston, they asked too much of their young guys the last couple of years. And we kept saying, oh, they're going to be fun to watch. But they never got on the same page. They never looked like they had figured the NBA game out. That was part of the coaching change now as well. So Ime Udoka comes in. We know he had his off-court issues with Boston, but you also can't argue against the fact that he was a phenomenal assistant coach in the NBA and what looked to be a very, very solid NBA head coach in his lone stint where he wins an NBA, where he gets the NBA finals. So, yeah, Houston is ready to jump the standings. I think they win at least 10 more games than they did last year, maybe even 12 to 13, which puts them sniffing around the play-in. And that's why somebody like Dallas is in big, big trouble.
The last 3 seasons, they've had a top 5 pick. They're all going to be on this roster, and they're going to be contributors, and not more than contributors. I mean, Jabari Smith last year's pick. The year before that, Jalen Green was, I think, the number two pick, right? I think. And of course, you're talking about Amen Thompson coming over from whatever that over league team is, overtime, whatever they call it. You get paid to just play some basketball for a minute. I think this team's a team ready. That coaching signing, I think, was immense for this roster. And the best thing they could have done was not, as was alluded to before, potentially flirt with James Harden about coming back and signing with him in the offseason.
That would have been dumb. That would have been all kinds of dumb. He is the wrong player at the wrong time.
Yeah,
I'm glad they didn't do it.
I completely agree with you. Final team, the San Antonio Spurs, 22 wins last season. They are worse, I think, after getting the number 1 pick, Victor Wembanyama. They are, I should mention this just for funsies, they are tied for dead last with a handful of teams for the worst odds to win the NBA championship. But the question isn't, is this team going to win an NBA championship? Is this team prepared to be better this year? This is the second youngest team in the National Basketball Association of the Americas. So is it any doubt when you get, what do they call them, the French Mamba to come over and be that number 1 pick, that they're in a better spot than they were last year?
Just like Houston can win 10 to 12 more games, San Antonio can as well. It all hinges on Wembanyama staying healthy. But the pieces around him, the young pieces that are going to grow with him. Trey Jones is a table setter. Devin Vassell is your shooter. Keldon Johnson is your scorer. And then Jeremy Sohan as your wild card guy. I see a young, and it's not just the hair. I legitimately see a young Dennis Rodman in Jeremy Sohan. I love that guy so much. And to put him next to Wembanyama on the front line, they'll get some yeoman work out of Zach Collins if he can stay healthy. Jetty Osman was a nice pickup of a veteran who's been around the block a little bit and gives you some youth. But in that second unit, they're not ready. They're still so young, especially in the second unit, but the starting lineup is young too. They're going to be overmatched on a lot of nights, but there are going to be nights where Wembanyama and friends are just that good and that young and that well coached, and Greg Popovich, with him, that 10 to 12 games as an improvement is going to be well within their reach. I look at this team, I say they're probably not play-in ready yet, but it also wouldn't surprise me if suddenly they were, because Wemby is that good. This is Tim Duncan level as far as what they got. And it's no disrespect to David Robinson or Kawhi Leonard, but Wemby is that good. And this has got to be the second most excited that Spurs fans have ever been as far as a young team that you're kind of restarting a journey with. It's unbelievable what this group
the second
has.
most excited is probably right, because the first time you had a Tim Duncan coming alongside of Charles, David Robinson, I should say, and sort of being the mentor,
a veteran group,
exactly. This time it's a lot younger group, as I mentioned. Watch out for, I think it was just signed a few weeks ago, out of Alabama, Charles Bediako. He is 7 foot, like 230. He's a little wirier than I would like, but that's sort of the modern big man. You're not going to get a lot of Shaq thickness out there in the NBA anymore. But he's also got a mean streak to him. He's got a pretty decent mean streak to him, which could be an interesting thing if he's able to make the roster. I think he makes the roster probably pretty fine. But, he was the guy that thought he was going to get drafted. Left Alabama, thought he was going to get drafted, went undrafted. And now he is sitting here signed up with this here San Antonio Spurs team. So a team that gets lost just because of their market size and where they are at, but a team that they're probably going to have to win 18 to 20 more games to be play-in worthy. That's a lot to ask for essentially the number one pick. But you're going to see them on national TV a lot more, and they're going to be a lot more relevant, and they could continue to build upon that, which is what Greg Popovich does. Is it this year he's going to retire, even though he's just signed a contract extension? Like, I don't know which year he decides he's going to do
like it. LeBron is immortal, Greg Popovich is drinking the same wine, folks.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And he is a big wine drinker. So actually, LeBron is too. Interesting thought there. They're both.
That wasn't an accident that I used that analogy.
Interesting. Okay, look at you knowing what you're doing. All right, why don't you know what you're doing in this Darren Williams episode?
All right, it's been a long one, but we appreciate everybody coming along for the ride. Just so much to talk about in the Western Conference. If you want the video version, we're always on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe over there. If you want audio only, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes is where you get this here podcast. Next week, we've got the prediction show. We will order these teams. East is going to be a lot easier than the West. We'll do our predictions as far as the major awards and that sort of thing. It's going to be fun. And you know what? After that, the season is upon us. I can't wait. There are so many good storylines this year. I think I'm more excited for the start of this season than I was last year, even.
Wow. And last year was a good season. Last year was a pretty good season. All right. That's going to do it for us. Bye, Joel.
Bye, Darren Williams. We'll see you.